Joining us right now to talk about this and much more, Democratic Congressman Adam Smith. He's the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's nice to have you here in person. The Senate Armed Services Committee is the first to be vetting Donald Trump's pick to be Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. As you know, as someone who has served and has been ranking in chair when it comes to House Armed Services for quite some time, what question would you have for him?
Well, I mean, up front, character and credibility matter, and I think ultimately that's what we learned with the Matt Gaetz pick. Yeah. I mean, in this era, and obviously President-elect Trump has been through a whole lot, there's a lot of questions about that, and I think there's a tendency to think, well, I guess nothing matters anymore, but what Matt Gaetz tells us, it does. Okay, you have to have a certain amount of credibility, and the history that you have leading up to that affects that, and the same thing's going to be true of Peter Hegseth. You know, he does have, the sexual assault allegation that he has to answer to. I think that credibility issue is going to be number one. And then two, does he have the experience and the background to do the job? He has not been in a decision-making position on any sort of national security matter. Yes, he served in combat, and that certainly impacts it. But running the Pentagon has to do with a lot of relationships, a lot of decisions that he literally has no experience in doing. So I think senators will want to know, do you know how to run this place? I mean, forget what policy you want to implement. Do you know the basics of how to run this institution that is the world's largest bureaucracy?
Another pick I want to ask you about is Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. You know her. You served with her. She served on Armed Services, right?
She did.
Yeah. You have questions. I think you called it dangerous, her selection. And we heard from Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who said something similar. I want to play for you what he also said about her selection.
If we bring in somebody like this, who smells to other intelligence agencies like someone who will compromise their sources and methods and be far too cozy with Russia and other adversaries, then they're going to hold back information that could be really critical to our success.
I think that is very well said. And look, there are several layers to concern. First, have the same concern. She has no experience in the intel community, doesn't understand it. But some of the things she said when she met with Assad and basically repeated his worldview. On Putin, she's pushed these Russian talking points about how, Russia believes that Ukraine started the war, which is insane. Okay,
she also has a long history. CNN has been reporting of questioning intelligence in our intelligence agencies.
Absolutely, yes. So I think it is a dangerous pick. But look, there's a thing laying over the top of this. Donald Trump wants to blow it up. Okay, he wants to blow up the Pentagon, he wants to blow up the Justice Department, he wants to blow up the intel community. And it seems many times like he wants to do that so it will do his personal bidding. And that's a huge problem. And whether it's Tulsi Gabbard or Matt Gaetz or Pam Bondi or whoever it is, whatever their qualifications are, what the country really needs to be worried about, what does Donald Trump intend to do with the Department of Defense and the Justice Department and the intel community? Will they continue to serve our nation's interests, or will they serve a more narrow set of interests specific to Trump?
And what will he do about Ukraine is also a question.
Yes.
It's something that you and I have talked about every time you've been on in the last couple of the last 2 years. What do you think is a realistic possibility of the United States, not something you want to continue obviously supporting Ukraine and its efforts against the Russian invasion? What do you think is the realistic possibility of the U.S. pulling support for Ukraine?
Let me start. I think it's very realistic. And look, I was very worried about the rhetoric coming out of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and a lot of other Republicans. It was like, we're not pro-Russia. We just want to get to a peace agreement. You don't get to a peace agreement if you don't support Ukraine. If we had not passed that supplemental that we passed last April, which, by the way, was 4 months too late and put Ukraine in a deep hole because of where Donald Trump was coming from, they lose, all right? Putin's not going to stop unless you're able to stop him. If we do that, then great, negotiate a peace. It's not negotiating a peace if Ukraine is destroyed by Russia. There has to be a sovereign, democratic Ukraine. There's not going to be if we don't continue to help them defend themselves.
One thing we also know that Donald Trump has promised coming in is he's this you can't call it a department because it's not a department. It's a project to bring about government efficiency run by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and root out waste. It was just announced yesterday, Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to chair a new oversight subcommittee in Congress that's going to work in conjunction with Musk and Ramaswamy on this government efficiency project. What do you think this subcommittee will accomplish?
Not a lot. And let me just say, I think, Bill Clinton and Al Gore had reinventing government. I mean, when he was president, and they went in, they tried to say, how can we make this more efficient? That's great. I've seen no evidence that Marjorie Taylor Greene has really any understanding of how government functions. And when Elon Musk says he can cut $2 trillion out of the budget, 60% of the budget is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And he's also saying, I'm not going to cut any, or Trump has said he's not going to cut anything out of that.
So where's that money?
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to drag us, as they say, they said there would be no math. So we're getting into math here, but you got a $6.5 trillion budget. You're not going to touch 60% of it. You're down to a little over $2 trillion. So what, you're going to cut 80% of everything else? Defense is about $1 trillion. So now you're down to $1.7 trillion that you're going to cut $2 trillion out of. The math doesn't add up. The instinct to want to make government more efficient, yes, let's do it. There's 1,000 different ways to do that. But to come in and think that you could slash it like he slashed Twitter, okay, people want their Medicare checks. They want their Social Security checks. I think we want to continue to defend this country. So even if you cut all the stuff, Republicans don't think education matters, all this, that doesn't even get you there, even if you cut every last penny of that. And by the way, even education is important because it helps fund poor school districts. It's what the federal government does to try to give people opportunity. So I think they're going to run headlong into reality.
You are much better with math on the fly than I am. I'm just going to say that straight up.